So chapter 10, key issue 2, is about why people consume different types of food. So there are differences between the developed countries and developing countries and the patterns of what they eat and how much they eat. And there are patterns you can recognize in the world for undernourishment. So when we talk about diet, the dietary energy consumption is the amount of food that an individual consumes. And for most people, you hear that people need about 2,000 calories a day. In the developed world, it might be a little bit less because we don't move as much. We're not as active. And it also depends on your height, your weight, your age, and the amount of muscle mass you have. So usually men have higher dietary needs than women. And there's calculators you can use online to see based on your age and your height how much you should be consuming a day. What we eat and how much food we eat depends upon the level of development of the country you live in and the actual physical conditions of your area and yourself. If you look at this map here, it shows the leading food energy source for different countries. So you can see that about 90% of all grains produced are wheat, rice, and maize, or corn. And so if you look at this map here, it shows you that most people in the U.S. and Canada are dependent on wheat-based foods. In Central America, corn. In some areas of South America, you're going to see areas that are stronger in rice, some in wheat, and some in maize, and then some grains that are considered to be others. Same thing in Europe and Russia, very wheat dependent. Most of Southeast and Southeast Asia, rice dependent. Southwest Asia, and throughout Africa, some places it's maize, some places it's rice, some places it's wheat, and in some places they depend on other things like maybe sorghum or millet. So the source of nutrients is really varied depending on whether you're a developed or a developing region. Developed countries tend to get most of their protein from meat products, things like beef, pork, and poultry, and others, but these are the top three. And most developing countries have most of their protein come from cereal grains. So if you look at this map, you can see a pattern. If meat is at least 25% of a country's diet, the country's shaded in purple. So you have Australia, most of Western Europe, Canada, the United States, and countries in South America too, like Brazil and Argentina. So countries in South America that are further along that development continuum. And then you see other countries where they get a lot of their protein source from cereals or grains. And so some countries that are in orange, you see it about 50%. And then countries that are consuming 25% or less of cereals are yellow. And then you have some countries that have their food coming from other sources. And then countries we don't have data on, like South Sudan, because it's a very new country. Or Western Sahara, because it's a contested country. Same thing, if you look at the percent protein from meat, 30% and above is the darkest color. And then you can see, again, that very similar trend. So what is undernourishment? When we talk about people starving to death, most people don't actually die of starvation. They're dying of undernourishment. Undernourishment means that they are not getting enough food, so their energy consumption is below the minimum requirement that they need to maintain a healthy life and to carry out light physical activity. The UN estimates that about 850 million people in the world are undernourished, and 99% of them are located in developing countries. Worldwide, the total number of undernourished people has not changed much in several decades, and in many places in the world, it's gotten better. But there are also many places in the world where it's gotten worse. So it's kind of balanced out. You can see that India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, together they have a lot of the world's undernourished people. India by itself has a huge amount of the world's undernourished people. And so you're going to see a lot in South Asia of undernourishment. China has a lot of undernourished people, particularly in the rural areas. Latin America, very few. Sub-Saharan Africa, a high amount as well. And then Ethiopia alone in the Horn of Africa has 3.8%, so Ethiopia by itself has a large large amount. If you see the percent of undernourished people spread out in the map, you can see, again, sub-Saharan Africa, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. And so you can see these patterns, and these patterns should be familiar. You should be able to look at this map here and say, you know, this looks a lot like when we were mapping out the countries that were less developed, the countries with high infant mortality rates, the countries with lower life expectancies, the countries that had faster population growth. And that kind of falls right in with the countries that are undernourished. And if you look at the undernourished people in millions, you can see that in the recent decades, South Asia has had the largest increase. And so South Asia since 1996 has had a huge rise. And that most countries or regions were either decreasing or slowly increasing in that time. You also notice that between 2006 and 2011, you might notice that there was a spike in undernourishment in developed regions and throughout most of the world. And this might be able to be correlated back to the recession of 2008, the global recession. But the only countries that have a huge increase, or only regions that have a huge increase, will be South Asia, which has spiked and is now slowly decreasing, but it's still much higher than most places. Sub-Saharan Africa and East Asia is on the rise again. And that is it for key issue 2.